everybody, Sandra here from Creating Spain. I've just got a couple of little tips for you today that you might find handy. I bought ages ago various split pins, you know, the sort of thing. Now the very plain ones, the larger ones, you can buy in virtually every stationer, so this type of thing you can get easily. The little brown ones were the only little ones that I could get at the time, couldn't get any coloured ones. You buy what you can at the time. But what happens if you fancy changing the colour? Well, there's actually a really good way of having a bit of fun and jazzing up any metal ornament type things like this that you might have, and that's embossing powder. So I've got some different ones here with different versions of my homemade coloured embossing powder and some other ones. This one is a platinum one, which is a pre-bought one. That one is a sparkle white, which I made up. This one here is a sparkly one as well. This one is a mauve tinted one, and this one I really like is a silver sparkle one, which is rather pretty. So all you do is you dab it in your Versamark as you do normally, dip it in your powder and heat it like you do everything else, and lo and behold you get nice little coloured split pins or whatever else it happens to be that you've decided you want to colour. Now if you happen to be a fan of nail art and so on and so forth, you might possibly have acrylic powders. And you might, for example, have dipping powders in different colours. I haven't tried it, but I suspect that that would work as well. Next thing, I made myself a stencil and I cleaned up all the bits off of the mat and they went all over my table, but I swept them up and I put them into a little plastic cup. I added a couple of drops of alcohol ink, and now I have a lovely lilac colour selection that I can put inside a shaker card. If you are making a stencil with, you know, very tiny pieces and you can collect them up, don't waste them because they can be used. Now, as with my previous example of this one, you're often left with lots of tiny little bits that you have to scrape off of a mat, and that can be a pain in the neck. Especially if you're using one of these mats, you really don't want to crease it and bend it any more than you absolutely have to because they are so fragile. Bend it too much and you're not going to be able to use it, which would be a real pain in the neck since they're so expensive. So enter something like this. Now this happens to be a fairly heavy duty book binding plastic cover. You can buy them in packets. I buy them in packets. I think there's something like 100 in a pack or maybe even 200. Relatively cheap. But it's very tough, sturdy plastic and it's really useful. So what you do is you apply a temporary adhesive to both sides of this. Now I use tack it over and over and I dilute it because you definitely don't want to put a full tack on here. You'd never get anything off. So you do that and you place it on your mat, wherever it is you're using it. You put your stencil material over the top and you cut your stencil, but you cut it on half cuts. Now because this is relatively tough stuff and your stencil material, if you're using stencil material like I am, which is, I think this is a silhouette one, it's thinner. If you're cutting it on half cut, you're going to get an excellent cut on your stencil and it will cut very slightly into the plastic below. However, you can then remove your stencil because that will be done. When you remove this, if you can't easily scrape it off, Teddy wants attention. If you can't easily scrape it off, you can just put it in the sink with warm soapy water and get it off that way. But you can bend this any way you like and it doesn't make any difference. This is easily and cheaply replaceable. This is not. So this makes it a much easier option if you are going to be trying to do fiddly little things which are going to leave lots of little bits in place. Now the other thing that you might want to consider doing is using some of this, putting a good strong temporary adhesive on the back of it and just using it as an extra layer for your cutting mat for normal use. If you're anything like me, you probably don't use any more than A4 at one time, but if you do, you could either buy something which is very similar to this. You can get very flexible chopping mats, they're quite similar, and you could actually place that over the top. Now the difference, if you have a DX machine, is that this is the area where your blade is going to do the test, and it will then think, you've got a much thicker material, so it will probably want to do either higher pressure or it will want to do more than one cut. Now I haven't tried it, but if you have an old mat and you want to give it a try, what I would suggest is that you place it directly under those marks. And as long as it is well stuck down, what I would think would happen, as I said, I've not tried it, so you do so at your own risk, it's going to do its test on here, so it will get the right difference of thickness between that and whatever you have put on top of it. So if you want to give that a try and leave comments down below and let me know how you get on, I would be quite interested. As I said, if you're concerned about damage or whatever, don't try it. I see no reason why it should be a problem. Now, whether it will cause you to not be able to read the registration marks, I wouldn't have thought so. I don't think that would be an issue. This would be a great idea if your mat is worn out, and if you're thinking that you have to replace your mat, so that would negate that. This would also be cheaper than putting a cricket mat over the top, which some people do. Now this happens to be an opaque one. You can get the same stuff in a clear. I do like to recycle in my craft room where I can, and I've got strings of these lights. Now, as it happens, I have chopped the lamps off of here. They were like that, and I've chopped the ends off because I intend to use them in card making and they're too bulky. So how do you stop them being bulky? Well, a real good secret of doing this is a hot knife of sorts, or even probably a soldering iron if you don't have access to one of these wood burning tools. And what you do, being very careful because you're dealing with a hot knife here, you slice into the protective plastic coating. Now this is nice and easy to do, like that, and you go through the coating on this top bit as well. There we go. Do it with an open window or do it outside because you don't want the fumes. Twizzle it off like that just by gripping. And you're left with the actual bowl plus about 1/2 centimetre of extra plastic, if you look at it that way. Now the bulb only comes to about there, so you can get rid of this bit. How do you get rid of it? Well, you could probably get rid of it with one of these things, but this isn't what I would recommend to do because you probably end up burning yourself. I would use either a nail file or an E-file. I've got an E-file and it gets through this stuff really easily. With a normal nail file emery board, it's a little bit more hard work. Sandpaper would also do the trick. Now when you've done it, it will end up looking like this, which I have taken down to about 1/2 centimetre, so it is considerably smaller and perfectly usable for card making or other purposes, whatever you want to use an LED for. So be green, go through your old lights and see what you can repurpose. Okay, 2 more tips for you. If you're not used to making circuits and you're not sure you're going to get it right, that it's going to work, I would suggest that you make your circuit on a piece of plastic. Now I've got some quite stiff plastic here. If you wanted to, if it works, you can actually use this as a card insert. Just back it with a piece of normal card. Do the rest of your work over the top of it. No one's going to be any the wiser. But at the same time, if you decide that your design isn't working or that you need to do a lot of alterations to it, you can easily peel the tape off of this without wrecking anything. You can use it time and time and time again until you get it right. So the other tip for this is the switch. No matter whether you're making your card base from card, whatever you're doing, it will pay you to use some stiff plastic to do the switch. The reason for this, if you're doing a slider switch, is that there is a lot more pressure put on it if it's made of plastic. If I were to make this from card and apply pressure, it would collapse under the strain. You could even just make it so that it was like this. That will be your switch. You can put more pressure on that and it will contact better. So if I hold this battery in place and I lightly touch that, you can see the light goes on. It's got a certain springiness to it, and that resistance pushes it against the circuit and will enable you to get a much better contact. Okay, that is it for today. Hope you enjoyed these tips and hints. Leave some comments down below, and if you want to, go look at my playlist for hacks and so on. You might find something very interesting in there. Take care now.